We don't need any lessons from BBC or from anyone. And think we have no values and we just are there to, we don't respect freedoms, we don't respect human rights. Sure, you think so? BBC, you think so? You take time, you broadcast, and from morning to evening, this is literally just abusing people. You're abusing Rwandans, you're abusing Africans, values. What values do you know, my dear sister, on behalf of BBC? There are some of these problems we have had in our continent. Those from the north who define or want to define values have been part and parcel of these problems we have been facing.
International media has sometimes contributed to negative perceptions of Africa, which can perpetuate stereotypes, hinder development, and impact the continent global standing due to misinformation, lack of understanding. In today's video, we're going to react on this clip of Rwanda President Kagame, Paul Kagame, where he called out BBC sometimes back and tell them that we don't need anyone to educate us about values, democracy, and everything. Let's watch this video and then we go react on it as we do always.
Thank you very much. My name is Ansoy from the BBC. I have a quick question for President Kagame. As chair of the Commonwealth, I wonder what your priority will be, especially in terms of upholding the values of democracy and human rights, given that there's been a lot of scrutiny on your country and the record of your government, and critics have been pointing out the number of opposition leaders and journalists who are in prison. I wonder what your leadership of this organization is going to look like in the face of that.
Right. I think checking of facts is a serious problem with the very institutions we should have relied on to inform the public, the general public, the world, about some of these facts. Or whether the facts themselves or the interpretation of some of the things that actually happen. Now, let me start with the issue of values. Who defines the values? Or who doesn't actually have values? When people talk about values sometimes, there's one part of the world that has assumed the sole responsibility and the monopoly of defining values. So the rest of us have no values. We've just to keep learning from these ones who define the values. And by the way, the danger also is, it doesn't matter how long you take learning, you will never qualify. You will just always be branded somebody who has no values or who comes from a place where there are no values. So I want to put this case clear. Those from the north who always assume where BBC comes from, who always think they are the face of values, the rest have to follow. It's a big mistake. It's not true. We have values too. We here in Rwanda, in Africa, we do. No question about it. Second, there are some of these problems we have had in our continent, in Rwanda. Those from the north who define or want to define values have been part and parcel of these problems we have been facing. Some of them have actually been the cause of the problems we face. But at the same time, like the genocide here that took place here in Rwanda, where 1 million people over were killed. Well, I remember, if your memory serves you well too, I'm not inventing anything. The debate that went on at the UN, it was like, these developed rich countries, those who define values, simply took it like, these are just Africans killing each other. These debates were in the open. But you think that is true? You think the divide that actually led to this genocide was just a creation of Rwandans? Not the people from the north who actually divided this country? Told people to think of themselves as belonging to one ethnic group and the other to think as belonging to another ethnic group, and therefore they should kill each other. Not only are they different, but they should kill each other. Would you believe that? Would you tell me that the 20 million people, this is documented by other people, not by me, who were killed in the Congo, were killed by other Congolese in the old days of King Leopold? And you think all that just disappeared in a moment? Then you had the savages coming over and taking over their own countries and killing each other? And then the others assume the higher ground, they are up there in the north, and keep pointing fingers at those of us and think we have no values and we just are there to, we don't respect freedoms, we don't respect human rights. Sure, do you think so? BBC, you think so? You take time, you broadcast, and from morning to evening, this is literally just abusing people. You're abusing Rwandans, you're abusing Africans, you're values. What values do you know, my dear sister, on behalf of BBC? So I want to assure you, there is nobody in the BBC or anywhere else thereabout who would be holding values better than we do here in Rwanda. Except if we just want to cover up the mistakes of the same people who want to define these values for us. Or really tragic mistakes of things they have caused. So when you are saying that, you may tell somebody else, people who don't have time to think or who don't have a history where they have struggled with these complications, yes, they will. But here, those of us who have faced what we did, who have gone through what we did, we take our responsibility. Of course, genocide could not have happened just on the hands of others who brought it to us. No. We, Rwandans, have a responsibility. We have our share of the blame for it. But there are others who should take responsibility for that. So I just want to let you know that these issues of upholding values and so on, as far as I'm concerned, as I know, as far as Rwandans are concerned, we don't need any lessons from BBC or from anyone. I tell you this with firm conviction. So democracy or people in prison you're talking about, there is nobody in Rwanda who is in prison that should not be there, because we have a justice system that is actually functional and is fair. Let me tell you something instead. Actually, there are people who are not in prison who should be there. There are no people who are in prison that shouldn't be there, but there are people who are not in prison who actually should be there. And I will explain to you if you want. I know, for example, I've been seeing journalists writing all kinds of things. Take somebody, praise her or him, and make them champions of all kinds of things. That's fine. I wish these people are making them champions of their own situations, if they wanted them, but not of our situations. And I give you some details.
Welcome back. Now, this is Paul Kagame calling out BBC. There's this BBC journalist asked a question about the values, and Paul Kagame was there to answer it. Like, those people who think they can teach Africans about values, they can teach Africa about democracy, they think they are the best on this, and they forgot that they are the worst. For example, how can you teach Africa about values and then you yourself as a country, the West, you don't have values for yourself? How you treat others, how you treat Africans, treat black people, there's nothing like value in it. But in today's video, we are focusing on international media, how has negatively impacted Africa. Apart from this, what Paul Kagame is talking about. International media has played bigger role, negative and positive, in Africa. But most of them is negative. For example, stereotypes and they always focus on poverty, war, and disease. Like, Africa is always portrayed as a continent plagued by poverty, conflicts, health crises like HIV and AIDS, Ebola, etc., etc. While this issue exists, this selective focus overshadows progress, resilience, and achievement of Africa, and even making some of the people, even African in diaspora, to think negative of Africa. And this too is being portrayed, or the teachings are being taken to schools, making younger generation, or the generation that's coming up, to think negative of Africa. When someone think of Africa, he just think of disease, think of HIV, think of crisis left, right, and center, poverty, and everything. And this is the negative impact that international media has put or has impacted Africa. The media also, they always portray Africa as a single entity, not knowing that Africa has 54 states, countries, diversity of cultures, languages, and political systems. But they always take Africa as a one entity. Now, when you take Africa as a one entity, someone who want to invest in Africa, African countries who want to travel in Africa, in a country like Ghana, a country like Kenya, you may find Kenya, we are good, and maybe Sudan has a problem, Kenya, we are faring well. But because Africa has been carried as one entity, that person will think whatever is happening in Sudan is happening in South Africa. Whatever is happening in Somalia, it's happening in Ghana. Thus, it's affecting all 54 countries, because you take Africa as one entity or as one country. It affects so much the development of some countries, because even the investors cannot come to Africa. Even the black Americans who want to trace their roots back, they are not going to trace back, because anytime they see this war is going on in Congo, the international media is reporting that a war in Africa, somewhere in Congo, instead of war in Congo, Africa, it's affecting. So international media is playing a role of stereotyping, misinformation, and everything. Another thing that media has negatively impacted Africa is underreporting positive stories. In Africa, we have success stories in technology, education, economic growth, innovation, but these things or these positive stories receive little attention, reinforcement, and they don't focus on this positive narrative or positive stories that is found in Africa. For example, a young man built a radio station here deep in the village in Kenya. A young man built an aeroplane from scrap metals here deep down in Tanzania. But international media won't focus on that. It will give its like just 1 minute airplay, but giving negative things like 1 hour airplay. And thus is diminishing Africa, and underreporting the stories has put Africa in a bad state that we lack technology, we lack innovative people, and even people are thinking that Africans people, they are not educated because of underreporting the positive stories. And the coverage frequently emphasizes international aid as Africa's savior while underreporting local solution and initiative. This narrative can perpetuate the perception that Africa cannot solve its problem independently, because whenever we are being helped by IMF, World Bank, and all these non-governmental organizations, that's where the media will focus. But they don't focus on they cannot report that we as Africa or the countries in Africa cannot solve their problem by themselves. When there is hunger crisis somewhere in a country, maybe in Somalia, they will focus on that. But they cannot go and focus where Ethiopia is growing coffee, where Kenya is growing maize or tea. They cannot focus how we solve our own problems, our hunger problems. They cannot focus or they cannot report on the positive things we do for our people. They cannot focus or report that we can solve our own problems. Rather than they are focusing on the non-governmental organization. They are carrying cameras following them everywhere, World Bank, IMF, so that they can think, or people can think, that Africa is for aid only. They are being aided. They can't help themselves. They can't feed themselves. You see? And that's why I salute someone like Paul Kagame, who openly, in some cases, have told them, you know what? You get out of here. You saw in West countries like in Sahel, the big medias from France were sent away because of covering only negative things. But we have positive things in the countries of Africa. Now, do you remember a Nigerian author, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, highlights in her concept of the danger of a single story? The media often reduces Africa to a single narrative, leaving no room to complexity. Okay, this can cause discourage like investment, tourism, and all those, because when you reduce Africa at large in a single, you focus Africa maybe in a town like Dar es Salaam, so, and you give out story of Dar es Salaam only, and you make it like it's a story of all Africa. Now it reduces investment to countries like South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, because whatever someone have seen in Dar es Salaam and does not like it, he will not come, he will not invest, he will not tour. So this creating of a single story for Africa it has causes a lot of negative impact to Africans. We are at how media has negatively impacted Africa. And even that's why we can reach at a point where Paul Kagame is calling them out, telling them we don't need any lesson, because the BBC, the Fox News, and those big CNN and those big media from international bodies, they don't care about Africa. They don't respect Africa, even the leaders of Africa. Questions, even the questions they are asking to the leaders of Africa, somehow it is for, they lack value. They are questioning about values, but they lack value. Another way how media can impact negatively Africa is when media reports so much of political instability or health crisis, it discourages tourism to African countries. Even if the issue is confined to specific regions, like, for example, Congo region, where there is, internal wars in Sudan, but the media focuses on that, and it reduces investment and tourism to most of African countries. Investment to focus on corruption. They only focus on corruption and instability. I agree that a lot of countries are in the verge of corruption. A lot of African leaders and presidents, they are in the verge of corruption. But there is some countries too where the leaders of that countries, yes, there is corruption, but not that much as the media reports. Okay, so when an investor is watching the news and the news is focusing on only corruption, and they don't focus on any negative side or any positive side, this will hinder the investment in Africa. Another thing is misrepresentation of history and culture. For example, the coverage of culture often overlooks African historical contribution to global civilization and the richness of its culture heritage. Reporting on cultural practices or traditional is sometimes sensational or misunderstood, perpetuating exoticism. There is these cultures of Africa where, for example, culture of Zulu, culture of maybe Luya, all these communities, there is somehow they misinterpret, or it is being misunderstood because of how it's being portrayed on the media or international bodies, and this affecting Africa at large. While these media are reporting, most of them are ignoring African voices. Stories about Africa are often told by outsiders rather than African journalists or analysts. This lack of representation can lead to misinterpretation and bias, where Africa perspective and solutions to problems are frequently underrepresented. So ignoring African stories, someone is giving a story of Nairobi, is a white somewhere there. Someone giving story of Ethiopia, but is a white. And they are not getting stories direct from the people, direct from the Africans, direct from the people who are living there. So it's awkward how someone living in Chicago is giving a story of Eldoret, of the athletics in Eldoret, and they are not getting these stories direct from the people living in Eldoret, the people who knows what's happening in Africa, the people who knows the positive sides, So when these guys are reporting, they end up giving up, or they end up misinforming and misinterpreting some things, okay? So whatever Paul Kagame has said on this video, I support fully. International media has played a bigger role in Africa, either positive or negative. International media is the cause of a lot of problems in Africa. International media is the cause of underinvestment, the cause of under tourism, it's affecting largely. And we have recommending for change if there is change, because to promote Africa voices, balancing reporting, and avoiding generalization, that's what we can do. And that's why we have a channel like this, Kenyan Beast, African Way. We have a channel like African Streamline, reporting all this, because we are the voice of Africa. We are the voice. We know what's happening. If it's corruption, we will tell you it's corruption. If it's positive, we will tell you it's positive. Whatever is happening in Burkina Faso, it's positive, and we will report how it is. Positive impact to Burkina Faso people. But because international media want to put a negative, say something on negative minds to people, seeing Burkina Faso as junta, seeing Burkina Faso as not a democratic country, seeing Burkina Faso as the dictator leader, they will always report something to make Ibrahim Traore look bad. When presidents of Tanzania, the late President Magufuli was doing great job for Tanzania, reports were going out negative because they were saying he's a dictator, but they will not report the positive side of him. They will say that he has oppressed the opposition, but they cannot report something positive on it. They will always say that he denied people of Tanzania to get direct or to get into corona vaccines, but they cannot report positive side. So we knew Magufuli as a good person because Tanzanians themselves loved him so much, and he was doing something for them. But because of the international media, the impact is being played. Some people thought that Magufuli was a big dictator and was not good for Tanzania. You see how it has impacted, or the media has impacted Africa negatively. Yes, I believe positively too. Some people have known Africa because of this media. But they know Africa because of that media, but they know Africa as Africa. They don't know Africa as a continent. That's why in video sometimes you ask people. I saw an interview, someone asking a random street question to white people, which is the poorest country in the world? And people are saying Africa. So they think Africa as one entity, not Africa as a continent. We have rich countries. We have Seychelles. We have South Africa, which has the greatest economy. We have Algeria, which is the second most economy. Ethiopia there. We have countries that are doing great. We have Zanzibar, where tourism can visit. We have Seychelles, where a tourist can visit. We have places in Kenya where tourism can do well, but they cannot showcase this. And that's why we take this opportunity as Pan-Africanist. That's why we take this opportunity as African Way Fraternity. That's why we take this opportunity to say Africa is great. And if you don't believe it, just be here on this channel. We will tell you, and we are going to show you how Ethiopia is doing great, Kenya is doing great, Uganda is great. Positive. By the way, I want you to support me because we are going to showcase Africa at large. Positive sides of Africa. We will create another channel and we will focus on positive impact of Africa. And that channel I will call Positive Africa. My director, are we together on that? Only. That's going to be only beauty of Africa.
It's going to be a very beautiful step to take.
Yeah.
It's going to be very nice.
It's going to be very nice, yeah.
We want to work out on Africa, and people should need to know Africa.
Yeah. So that's what we are going to do, and we are asking for your support when we open this new channel, Positive Africa. Boom. We want to show you that Africa is great.
In this channel, everybody who is watching,
go there. Okay, until next episode, and peace be with you.